I just wanted a point of reference, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form equating your work here.
Yeah.
The difference between the two. But would Summit 9, Unitary Evolutionary Enlightenment, be similar to what Aurobindo was talking about with Supermind?
I think so.
And
yeah.
Maybe the Vajrayana concept of Ati Yoga or Apex View?
The big difference there is that they were not aware of evolution.
Right.
And so if you can't be aware of it, you can't fully integrate it. And I think there's a missing piece. It's like the biopsychoactive nature of context. Once we could actually see that we're the leading edge of a 13.8 billion year process, once we can start to contemplate that within us, once we can start to embody that, once we can start to know it, like really know it, there's something very different that happens there than what can happen if you do not. It's just, and it's, I think, multiple times, like an equivalent might be if you're at the red power stage of development and you're egocentric and you have and you wake up to the world as one with your transcendent self, but the world through that filter is very one-dimensional. You can take one perspective, your own. You will believe that you are God and no one else can be God because you're egocentric. Your awakening will be fueled through your narcissism and your egocentric drives. You will think the earth is flat because that's all that's exposed there. You will be attached to magical thinking that all of this, that's what you're one with. Now, if you have that same awakening through a postmodern lens, and you're multiple, you can take multiple perspectives, you will believe that yes, you are God, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, but you just don't know it. It's a whole different thing. And what I'm suggesting is that when you then become one with this with this evolutionary cosmos, and the evolutionary impulses in you, that's so radically different than the oneness of any of those stages. And again, and the leap into that of becoming one with the entire cosmos, and this is the big one with the evolutionary impulse, one with the drive, one with the felt sense of creative advancement into novelty. When you become one with that, it's a whole different thing than what the traditions could have been one with, or how that enlightenment played out. But Aurobindo was an evolutionary.
Right.
And Aurobindo understood this.
Just as a follow-up to then, it's just, I'm trying to reconcile like how every really enlightened teacher that made it to the West, Osho, Chogyam Trungpa, Adida, like just had these radical flame-ups from that view.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it wasn't even subtle. It was like.
Well, I'm not convinced any of them were getting the unitary evolutionary view. They were getting the non-dual unitary view.
And do you think that they were disrupted because they weren't aware of shadow work? Or?
Oh yeah, and because waking up is not growing up, right? I think a lot of those they sourced most of their structure of development often was still mythic literal. That was one of the disasters of the Eastern influx of Enlightenment teachers into the U.S. as they were coming out of mythic literal amber cultures and plopping down into the postmodern West that was multicultural, multi-perspectival, and pluralist. And they were still operating from authoritarian, egocentric, often patriarchal, domineering kinds of models, and they were enlightened. But they could only be one with the world that they could be aware of, which is sourced through their developmental psychological structure, their life altitude. And in many cases, right, it was amber, or in some cases, it was postmodern pluralism, but with very screwed up deep shadows and broken, ineffective development in these other stages. And the enlightenment is real and genuine, and there's something to learn there. But when that enlightenment comes into the world of form, it's coming through their developmental psychological filter. And that's why the understanding of these different paths is so crucial. Waking up is not growing up. And growing up is only growing up if we repair the spiral of development. We have to repair the foundation to build the next story onto the house. That's a good analogy. Or the next story on the house is going to topple it over because it's just barely standing up with the 3 stories it's got. You put the 4th story on top of that spiral, it just comes down.
Just one last one.
Yeah, sure. No, these are just great.
Do you think that
I opened this up when I started talking about unitary evolutionary life.
Do you think that Christian mystics were
Bless you.
at an advantage in that regard because of the emphasis from very early? The emphasis was service and morality. The kind of embodying wisdom and virtue was an absolutely foundational piece of it. Do you feel like that's why so many of them went so high? And
Well, I think it's
so much secrecy.
I think that it's the same. So this is how I would interpret that. Okay, I think for one, I think Jesus was somehow operating through postmodern filter long before it was a stable structure in the world, and he had apparently very pluralistic values way ahead of the time. And that I think that that there's a leading edge attracted to teachers who are signaling that higher level. And so he attracted some of those that were able to enact that postmodern stage of development. And that was, in my best guess, the minority, as it still is today. Yeah. And then a whole lot of them were just virtue signaling, or just seeing what he was pointing to, knowing something was powerful and coming along for the ride, but looking through a whole different lens. And so I think that when he's teaching, for instance, that when he's through a postmodern lens, that service, right, love, service is the dominant expression of this higher, let that consciousness be in you, which is in the Lord Jesus. When he's expressing that through his filter of pluralism and love and service, that people will respond to that even if they're not there. Just like it happens today, right? And so what I think, you said the Gnostic Christians, right? Or did you use that word, not the Gnostic Christians?
I didn't use that word,
okay.
But
yeah.
Certainly the mystical side of it.
Yeah, the mystical side of Christianity. So what I think they were really good at was waking up, right? That the contemplative techniques that were pretty well hidden or destroyed or lost or made secret, the contemplative techniques were designed to wake you up to Christ consciousness. And then because their leader and some of the core followers were expressing that in postmodern service-oriented ways, that just kind of become institutionalized within the ones waking up, even if they weren't really looking through that developmental lens. That's my best interpretation of what was going on.